Hi, and welcome to my first real video. If you decide that you like my content, please leave a comment, like, and subscribe to the channel. This sort of thing is my passion, and I'm really thrilled to be sharing it with y'all. So, with 10 official films in the original timeline, a slasher crossover, a remake, novelizations, and comic books, not to mention some really amazing fan films, it can be very confusing trying to figure out the what, why, and how of the classic slasher series Friday the 13th. I've been rather in love with the series since I first saw the first two films when I was far too young to be allowed to watch them. And this series of theory videos is the result of nearly 35 years of obsession with the series. One of the earliest and most common bits of confusion and perplexity arises betwixt parts 1 and 2. How did little zombie child Jason, as played by the ineffable Ari Lehman, who nearly drowned Alice Hardy at the end of the first film, become the grown man, as played by the late great Steve Dash under the sack and by Warrington Gillette, once unmasked, who stabs an ice pick into her skull upon her return to Crystal Lake mere months later? It's kind of an odd thing, and obviously at age 5 this question didn't bother me at all, but as I grew older it began to fascinate me. How can a prepubescent boy become a grown man in less than a year? It just didn't make sense to me at first. However, looking at the events that led up to Pamela Voorhees' final killing spree that Friday the 13th, especially in the context of the first two movies and the official film novelizations, amazing books, by the way. If you can get your hands on them, read them. The circumstances that led up to the first resurrection of Jason seem to reveal themselves, although they are never explained in specific detail, leading to the ability to engage in really fun and logical conjecture. Once that first resurrection is explained, though, everything else falls into place. First off, and this is important, I do believe that Jason drowned and died in Crystal Lake during that fateful summer of 1957. Pamela's first kills were not the main ones that we think of, though. They occurred the very next summer when she took her vengeance upon Barry and Claudette, the counselors who were making love while that young boy drowned, the two people she held primarily responsible for her son's death through their selfish, irresponsible actions. I happen to believe that this act of murder, driven by a mother's pain, anger, and her driving need to prevent any such accidents in the future, coupled with the forces of nature, are what resurrected Jason. Another possibility that plays there into is the fact that Elias Voorhees' blood flowed through his veins, and that may play a very strong part in why and how Jason was resurrected from the lake. The novelizations frequently point out that Jason is his father's son, and the glimpses that we get of Elias in the Part 6 novelization are incredibly intriguing. However, Elias Voorhees is another video that I'm going to do at another time. Further, in the late 2000s, the Wildstorm Friday the 13th two-part comic titled Badland says that the lands where Camp Crystal Lake was built had been cursed for hundreds of years before summer camps for children even were conceptualized. So basically, this was a perfect storm. The power of nature, a curse deep within the land, blood tainted by darkness, and a mother's undying love, corrupted by loss and despair. In such a place as Crystal Lake, where nature and death rule, Pamela's drive for both revenge and to protect other children from the irresponsibility of the selfish, self-centered teenage counselors charged with protecting the young campers could only have one conclusion. After a year trapped in the muck and branches at the bottom of Crystal Lake, the sacrifices of Barry and Claudette breathed life into the dead child's waterlogged lungs, and Jason found himself alive and on shore, vomiting up the water and detritivores that had filled his corpse. And he found himself there upon the shore, all alone. So, next question becomes, why didn't the newly resurrected child wander to town, seek help, do something other than stay right where he was? And this is where we get into pure conjecture. This is my theory, and although it makes sense to me, it was not addressed in any great detail by any of the source material that I've read or watched. All that the novelizations state is that he was waiting where he had last seen her for Pamela's return. No doubt Jason wanted to reunite with his mother over the years that passed, and incidentally, she did return to Camp Crystal Lake during that period in order to prevent the camp from reopening, including going there to poison the water. So shouldn't she have seen her son, or some evidence of his presence? My belief is that the nature of the forces that brought Jason back from the bottom of Crystal Lake kept him apart from the world of ordinary living people, even though he was alive, almost like a veil separating him from reality. Then came the fateful moment when Alice Hardy beheaded Pamela, and in that moment the veil was severed. Poor Pamela. She was a good mother, she really was, and she loved her son, there's no question. And Pamela's vengeance was passed on to her son, and all of a sudden he was able to interact with people once more. However, after 21 years of absolute solitude, and then enduring the sight of his mother's death, he possessed nothing but hatred for the people who came to Camp Crystal Lake. After all, they had let him die, sentenced him to unimaginable loneliness for over 2 decades, and then they killed the only person who ever had loved him or cared for him. That moment would break anybody, especially somebody who had his particular circumstances. Therefore, though, when Alice killed Pamela in 1979, Jason was a grown man, not an 11-year-old child as he was when he first died in 1957. He was alive in most senses of the term, just horribly broken by circumstances beyond his control, and he had been kept apart from society by forces beyond human ken. He had not been trapped in the mud beneath the water since Barry and Claudette died. He grew up into a man in the ruins of the abandoned camp, merely trying to survive and waiting for Mommy to come back for him. I do believe that he tried to drown Alice in the canoe. I don't think that that was just a nightmare that she had while she was out drifting. However, in her state of shock and trauma, what she saw was what she expected to see. Poor Pamela had been raving about a drowned little boy, not a wild wilderness man in his 30s. So, Alice was hallucinating, yes, but I do think that Jason was in the water at the time and that he did try to kill her. However, he failed because he was too shocked, horrified, and frankly depressed to act efficiently, and he had never killed a person before. Then the police showed up. Of course, there was no boy in the lake for the police to find. Jason was no child. Except, well, emotionally and to a certain extent mentally, although there's no question in my mind that he is far more intelligent than most people believe. And I do have evidence for this, probably going to be another video. And once Alice was in the hands of the police, or, well, more that he saw that the police were coming, he slipped away into the woods to plan his vengeance. It took him months, but Alice was foolish enough to return to the cursed site of the murders, and Jason was waiting, nursing a deep wound, too deep to heal, deeper than death. Since my long ago childhood, I've viewed Pamela and Jason as purely tragic figures. The first time I saw the first two Friday the 13th films, I wept, but not for those killed by the Voorheeses. I cried for the mother who was driven to madness and violence by the loss of her only child, and I cried for the son who was separated from his mother by death and then had to bear witness to her gruesome murder as the first time he saw her in over 20 years. And yes, I do agree with Ginny in part 2 that Jason witnessed Pamela's death. I think that he was held back from intervening by the supernatural forces pervading Crystal Lake. It's a tragedy of Shakespearean proportions in my view, and my lifelong love of these films and the character of Jason Voorhees was born therefrom. And some beautiful art that I have of the two versions of Jason that we see. So basically that is my theory to explain the inconsistency in Jason's age betwixt Friday the 13th parts 1 and 2, as well as his first resurrection. If y'all have any other theories about this, please write them in the comments. I'd really love to hear what y'all think happened at Count Crystal Lake betwixt 1957 and 1979. Also, although I would never dare call myself an expert, I'm just a fan, pretty normal little fan, tiny bit obsessive, tiny bitty bit. Let me know if you have any other questions about Friday the 13th, and I'll see if I can provide adequate answers, or at least provide some fun ideas and theories to consider. Also, many thanks to Josh Palmer of Shallow Grave FX for the Friday the 13th busts. He did my part 1, he did my Pamela, and he did my part 2. And to Scott Watson for his original art. I'm going to be linking their Instagrams in the video description, so if you want to order some truly beautiful horror art by really amazing, talented, cool people who I love talking to, you definitely should contact them. They're amazing. Sadly, the Friday the 13th novelizations are all out of print, but we can hope that they get reprinted once the Cunningham lawsuit is over. And we might even get some more movies. Fingers crossed and inverted. So, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed my theories and want to hear more similar ideas, please like and subscribe. Thank you very much. Have a lovely one, and love you dearly.